But they were going to arrest everybody that day, it's my understanding. And Brother K stepped up and said,
David, what do you say to those who say about the bloodstained men that protesting does not work? We tried that for thousands of years, probably tens of thousands of years, and yet we have yet to eradicate circumcision.
well, that is a loaded question because I'm not sure if protesting circumcision has really been going on for 10,000 years. In all fairness, I really don't think that. To my knowledge, the first modern protest against circumcision happened in 1970, and that is Van Lewis and Benjamin Lewis. They were brothers, and Van was inspired after reading a book, and he was like, "What the hell?" And he made a sign, and he was like, "I'm gonna go to the hospital. I'm gonna protest circumcision." And then his brother saw him, and he was like, "What are you doing? I want to help. I want to be a part of it." And I guess this was during I want to say Vietnam War or something. And his brother was afraid that that they would think that they were protesting the war. Anyways, long story short, to my knowledge, that's the very first protest against circumcision. Other than that, there's the historical stuff like the Romans outlawing it, or I think maybe the Greeks or something like that. Back then circumcision was different. Anyways, it was like just really just the part that extended past the glands. So foreskin restoration back then was easier. And that's actually the origins of the circumcision that we know today, where they ablate everything, and that's because once to my knowledge, just once the rabbinical Jews saw what was going on, that men were restoring their foreskins, that they got upset and they were like, "Oh, we gotta just remove everything. This can't be." Yeah, it hasn't been being protested for 10,000 years, at least to my knowledge. But then again, we don't even know the actual origins of circumcision itself. So I
Okay.
think protesting will work.
All right. Like, how many more years of protesting do you think it's going to take for the rates to start dropping drastically down to, like, let's say, only 20% of males getting circumcised?
How long will that take? There's always been this talk about a tipping point. Like once we hit a tipping point, which is when the majority of the population starts recognizing it as wrong. And then from there, ideally, after a tipping point, it just starts going downhill drastically from that point. Now, there's always been talk about, oh, the tipping point is just right around the corner. It's right around the corner. The next 2 years, the next 5 years. Chances are it could be within the next 20 years. I would like to think that it would be sooner. I feel like there's a lot of rumblings about people just becoming more aware of the value of autonomy, like your personal choices about your own body, who really owns you. Like we're moving. We once treated children as like literal property, people that we could exploit and put into forced labor. That sort of stuff was happening even here in the United States. Like we were literally putting children in factories and making them work in order to provide for their families. And now we don't do those sorts of things anymore. And we're very now conscious of how wrong that is. So I really think it's only a matter of time before the general public finally starts accepting how wrong circumcision truly is. I think a big uphill battle is actually ironically men themselves, because the fact that there's millions of circumcised men, it's an identity for them, and they really do not like any kind of rhetoric that says that they're damaged or defective. Naturally, no man wants to think of themselves like that, and so it's very difficult. And I think that we need to somehow get men more on board, because right now, for whatever reason, activism seems to have more women actually as supporters than there are men. Perhaps that'll once that changes, maybe that's when we'll actually start seeing a change. But I'd say maybe 20 years, but I would like to be more optimistic and say, 5 to 10.
So, some of us have noticed that whenever you talk in the comment section versus like real life, you sound different. Like, for instance, there is a post shared by on Bloodstained Men Friends, I believe, and it was a comment that you left talking about this is what's wrong with intactivism. Intactivists want to chase the fake gold at the end of the rainbow, and then it continued on. But then in real life, you seem a lot more diplomatic, I suppose. Do you have a reason why that is?
Well,
Or
that's interesting. That's I think what that is, that's evidence of real time. I changed my mind and my perspective because I really was feeling like Forgen and the idea of foreskin restoration is purely a pipe dream, and or like I put it, a fake gold at the end of a rainbow, right? I legitimately was feeling that way and believing that way, and the more I actually spoke to others about it, and I listened to them, and I realized that they believe that this is a real potential reality. I think that it'd be inappropriate of me to continue to act like it's nothing more than a pipe dream when the reality is hey, it might not just be sci-fi, it might be a science reality at some point, like many have already pointed out to me. We've managed to completely regenerate vaginas and penises already, along with other organs such as bladders and livers and stuff. I think it'd be great if one day that becomes reality and people can become uncircumcised, because really that would be the only way to be uncircumcised is if you've once been circumcised and now you undid it through regeneration and now you are uncircumcised. You could actually hold that title. Because as it stands, people who have their natural intact foreskins are just whole, natural, intact men. It's really inappropriate to call them uncircumcised when circumcision isn't the norm per se.
yeah. I think that's awesome, by the way, that you did change your mind. And I think that is the purpose of Prevail over the system, to provide both sides of the argument so people can make
Mm-hmm.
complete decisions. Because honestly, Prevail over the system doesn't know which is better. Like, we don't know if Origin's better. We don't know if Bloodstained Men's better, right? There's too many variables. They're both good arguments on both sides, which is better. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's awesome though that you were able to change your mind and listen to other people. And that's why I like having you on the POTS team, because you do come and you give Prevail over the system lots of new content and ideas to go put out to people. I do appreciate that, and I do like the fact that you actually listen versus actually shouting and getting mad, or just completely censoring all information of certain groups and people. But another question,
Mm-hmm.
going back to Gaudath, why do you think Gaudath didn't cover the invasion of Ukraine, but they chose to cover Israel?
Well, to my knowledge, Galdath is so new that they were formed after the invasion of Ukraine, but before this recent Palestine and Israel conflict. So if I had to guess, it'd be because they didn't even exist as an organization prior to that.
That is super interesting. Are they really that new? I've had no
To my
idea.
knowledge, they're so new. It's what, this past year, maybe last year, you know. But if I remember right, the Ukraine thing was what, February of 2022.
Yeah,
So there's a chance Galdev literally was founded afterwards, and so that perhaps would explain why they didn't bother to make such a post.
yeah, because
Or as yeah.
yeah, I'm checking right now the Intactivist Circle Guide to Giving, and Gaudath isn't even on here.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. That's interesting. See, this is why I like David. He it's a good defense. I like it. Yeah, huh, huh.
Now, had they been given the opportunity, like let's say they did exist prior and they did have the opportunity to cover that, perhaps they would have. But perhaps they wouldn't either, because there's a chance that it was just general kind of some sort of form of virtue signaling, something similar to during the 2020 Black Lives Matters protest. It's seemingly out of nowhere, every single company that you ever come in contact with, which would have otherwise no business in promoting any kind of protest related stuff, was suddenly taking a stance with Black Lives Matter. I remember going to my bank and putting the debit card in the machine and immediately like prompting me with how important it is to support Black Lives Matter. And that's my own bank. It
Yeah,
was a fascinating time, and I think that maybe that spirit of wanting to make a stance and stand with people that are having conflicts or issues and whatnot, that mentality maybe not going to go away anytime soon. People call it virtue signaling. Because it's like, is Galdef really going to somehow put aid towards Israel and try to help them? Because obviously they took a very firm stance against, as they called it, Hamsa terrorists.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because I looked up their tax exemption since August 2022. So they are very new. They are very, very new. Interesting. Well, I mean, they seem to
I
be doing
remember,
really good for being new. Hmm?
right. Well, it's funny because the last time I protested with Bloodstained Men was February of 2022, and I remember the Ukraine war thing. It just started happening, and when we were out there protesting, there were so many people thinking we were protesting the war. It was like, what?
Oh,
You
wow.
know?
That's crazy. Well, I mean, hopefully people walked up to you and be like, "Oh, wow, you guys really care about Ukraine and Russia, huh?" Be like, "Oh, no, we care about circumcision." Be like, "Oh, what?"
Right.
So
It was
hopefully
just so
that worked
funny. They
out.
were so confused.
Oh man, that is that is awesome though. See,
What did
making
you learn?
assumptions and things. Yeah. Because I mean, hey, I made assumptions about Galdef too. So look at that. You've changed Potts's mind and other people's minds, I'm sure, as well. So that's
Good.
awesome.
Yeah, I think you always got to have an open mind. You got to be willing to receive new information. You know, one thing Joe Rogan has said a lot, and I really like it, is the idea of you can't be married to your ideas. You could be introduced to an idea, and then suddenly you're just running with it. It's like, this is it. This is the answer. Everyone else who thinks otherwise is wrong. It's like you might not realize that you're missing a piece to the puzzle or something. There's always more things that you can learn about it. I think
yeah.
just outright declaring 4gen a scam might be very inappropriate because it's like, how much do you know that they're truly a scam? I think you could have perhaps worded it better. And I could see why there would be people that are upset with anybody who would just outright declare 4gen to be a scam when there isn't exactly any evidence to suggest exactly that they are.
Yeah. Or, or a cancer on intactivism. That was wild.
I believe that's an idea of, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to put all your eggs in one basket, and that basket is 4gen, and with that you completely start disregarding any kind of effort to stop circumcision now, right? Protect children today. That I could see as perceived as a cancer to intactivism, being the active effort to preserve genital integrity. That's why it's definitely not a good idea to just focus on 4gen and only put all your money to 4gen. I mean, everyone's a free person. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But over 3,000 children are being sexually mutilated in the United States alone every single day, and it could stop with education. And making people aware that the foreskin has value and it's not some residual part that needs to be removed, or else it'll cause problems down the line.
Yeah, so do you know what the next plans are for the Bloodstained Men or their next protest or event?
No, I'm not kept in the loop on any of that. But if I had to guess, it's going to be the same pattern that they've been doing for the past 11 years. And it's going to be another 2 week long, as they call them, circumcision crisis protest tours. I don't know what region. They just did, what was it? Is it Maine? I believe that area, the northeastern part of the United States.
Yeah, I think so. I think they did Virginia. I know that.
I'd imagine I'd imagine you could actually, if you were to really like investigate and look at every region that they've been going to, like you could probably start recognizing a pattern, and might be able to even put out some good predictions as to where they're going to go next. But yeah, your guess is as
Yeah.
good as mine.
Yeah. Okay, so they're gonna still protest in the winter though, right?
Yeah, yeah. To my knowledge, weather doesn't ever stop them, and it's obviously because if you're going to go through the winter, you could literally go to the Florida areas in the South, which are warmer, because ideally they're not going to protest in snowy areas while it's snowing, only because logistically it's difficult to actually get out there on the streets and protest. When it's cold and snowy, there's less pedestrians out, there's less people out and about, you know. So if you want to get the best bang for your buck, you're going to go to the areas that have the highest populations, that are out and
Okay.
about, you know. Mhm.
Okay. I do have a question that was a concern amongst some people. Bloodstained men, they seem to love to cover their interactions with the cops.
Okay.
And how does that promote genital autonomy? Wouldn't it be better for them to videotape like them changing minds of people that they talk to versus them getting harassed by the law? Because I feel like that's more of a First Amendment right thing that they're fighting then at that point. What do you think?
Well, I think the Bloodstained Men just wants to reiterate that they're going to follow all the laws. They're not going to break laws. They want to have a respectful, cordial relationship with police. And I think that a lot of the public really does support police. And ironically, I think there's also a large portion of the public that has a lot of disdain for police. So I could see how they kind of potentially are entering controversial waters there. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, any rational person will recognize that police are very important to any society. Because if someone's going to break into your home and hold you at gunpoint, you know, like who are you going to have come help you? You know, you know, like do we really want to just rely on ourselves to defend ourselves? You know, maybe that's a bad example, but yeah, I think let's say men showing a lot of support to the police is a good thing. I don't see how that could be interpreted as wrong. You know.
Okay, interesting. Because a lot of the captions were, "Oh, bloodstained man gets harassed by police" or whatever.
Oh, okay. So in those contexts, because yeah, like it's either or. Sometimes they have really good interactions with the police, and the police are like, "Oh, I just want to make sure you guys aren't walking into the street or anything," you know. And then other times the police get really triggered, you know, like because sometimes these are circumcised men themselves, and they get triggered at the very notion, like, how dare you imply that something's wrong with me, you know? And like I've mentioned in the past, sometimes that trigger could be so intense for people because they've never even consciously addressed these feelings. Unfortunately, when it comes to the police, they can become very irrational. There was a time when Brother K was actually arrested by police in Alabama, and it was essentially just because these police were triggered. You know, they had no actual right to do that because the bloodstained men had a right to protest. You know, it's right to freedom of speech and protest and assemble. You know, they promote if they're promoting any kind of stuff about police, good or bad, it's ultimately just to garner attention because the more attention they could garner, the more they get their message out.
Yeah, that's the good point
Mm.
too. Did they ever sue for getting arrested for a violation of their freedom of speech at all?
To my understanding, they let the sleeping dogs lie on that one because it would take a lot of financial effort and in doing that. So, to my understanding, they never pursued anything.
Okay.
But at the same time, the charges I believe were dropped, and he was essentially released. But they were going to arrest everybody that day, to my understanding. And Brother K stepped up and said, you know, basically pleaded with them like, no, if you're going to arrest anybody, arrest me. You know, I'm the one who organized this.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Man.
Mm.
Thank God we got, Arc Law and Gaudaff now. I'm sure they would step up to the plate and hopefully work with Bloodstained Men. Does Bloodstained Men work with any other intactivist groups that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I met Bloodstained Men, it was an event with Bloodstained Men and the Bay Area Activists. It was like a joint collaborative effort with those two organizations. So they've worked with them. I know they've worked with Your Old Baby, and I've even seen them work with Intact America, and I want to say Intaction, but I'm not for sure on that one.
Okay.
And they've promoted Cockfight, but as far as them, like, you know, maybe they have at Cockfight and Bloodstained Men at the same time at an event. I'm not sure.
All right. Hey, if you liked listening to David Candela's interview, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Check out the description for other important links. Bye!